They are still there, still in the room, still answering when spoken to, still showing up where they are supposed to show up. But something is gone, and you cannot name it, and you cannot locate exactly when it left, and you cannot get them to tell you what is wrong, because they do not say anything is wrong. They just say they are fine. And somehow, that is the most terrifying thing they have ever said to you. Because you know what fine means now. Fine means the decision has already been made. Fine means the conversation you needed to have 6 months ago is no longer available. Fine means the empath has gone somewhere inside themselves that you do not have a map to reach. And here is the part nobody warns you about. By the time you notice the silence, by the time it becomes impossible to ignore, it has usually been there for months. You were just still receiving enough to not register what was disappearing. Most people think the empath's silence is a reaction, a response to something specific, a protest, a punishment, a strategic withdrawal designed to send a message. Psychology tells a completely different story. The empath's silence is not a reaction. It is a conclusion. And the difference between those two things changes everything about what is actually happening and whether anything can be done about it. Dr. Judith Herman, in her landmark research on complex trauma and relational harm, identified what she called the exhaustion phase of prolonged emotional stress, the point at which the nervous system has spent so long in a state of heightened activation that it begins shutting down non-essential emotional output simply to conserve the biological resources required to survive. In plain terms, the silence is not anger with nowhere to go. It is a nervous system that has spent everything it had and is now in conservation mode. The empath did not decide to go quiet. Their nervous system made that decision long before their conscious mind caught up. And once you understand that the silence is biological before it is emotional, you begin to understand why it feels so different from every other kind of quiet that person has ever given you. It does not feel like waiting. It feels like completed. Here is what the neuroscience shows. The human nervous system is not designed for endless emotional output without return. Every time the empath reached out and was not met, every time they expressed a need and it was dismissed, minimized, redirected, or simply ignored, the brain's reward prediction system logged a specific error. Neuroscientists call this reward prediction error, the signal that fires when an expected outcome does not occur. Wolfram Schultz's research on dopamine neurons demonstrated that repeated reward prediction errors do not simply produce disappointment. Over time, they restructure the brain's expectation system entirely. The brain stops expecting the reward. And when the brain stops expecting the reward, it stops generating the motivation to pursue it. This is not a character change. This is not the empath becoming cold or indifferent or hard. This is the brain doing exactly what it was built to do. updating its predictive model based on the consistent data it has received. The data said, effort here does not produce connection. Expression here does not produce being heard. Vulnerability here does not produce safety. And once that update is complete, the behaviors attached to those expectations begin to disappear. The paragraphs stop. The late-night check-ins stop. The explaining and processing and trying to be understood, all of it stops. Not because the empath stopped caring, because their brain stopped predicting that caring in this direction would ever produce anything worth the biological cost. And here is what that biological cost actually is. Because most people dramatically underestimate what sustained, one-sided emotional labor does to the physical body. Elaine Aron's research on sensory processing sensitivity demonstrated that highly empathic individuals process emotional stimuli more deeply and at a neurological level more sustained than the general population. What this means practically: one dismissive comment that another person processes and releases in 20 minutes. The empath is still carrying 3 days later. One cold response, one night of being emotionally ignored, one moment where they reached and nothing reached back. All of it is being processed longer, at a deeper level, with more neurological consequence. And over months of this, over years, the HPA axis, the body's primary stress response system, remains in a state of chronic low-level activation that has measurable physical consequences. Elevated cortisol disrupts sleep. Disrupted sleep impairs emotional regulation. Impaired emotional regulation makes the already difficult relationship feel even more impossible to navigate. The immune system weakens. Inflammatory markers rise. The hippocampus, responsible for memory consolidation and emotional context, shows measurable shrinkage under conditions of chronic psychological stress. The empath is not just emotionally exhausted. Their body has been paying a cost that was never visible from the outside. And at some point, not dramatically, not with a declaration, not with a final argument or an ultimatum, the body simply says no, no more. Not out of anger, out of survival. Now here is the layer that most people miss entirely, because this is where the silence becomes something more than just exhaustion. This is where it becomes something permanent. Neuroscientists studying emotional memory and relational trauma have identified that what they call cumulative emotional encoding, the process by which repeated small injuries build a memory structure that eventually functions as a single unified threat response. No single moment caused the silence, but every moment contributed. Every time the empath explained their feelings and was told they were overreacting, the brain encoded it. Every time they tried to have a conversation that the other person redirected, deflected, or weaponized, encoded. Every time they gave the benefit of the doubt, and the benefit was used against them, encoded. Every time they chose generosity when they should have chosen their own protection, encoded. The brain does not forget these moments the way the conscious mind sometimes chooses to. The brain builds a pattern from them. And once a pattern is established in the brain's threat system, once the amygdala has learned that this person, this dynamic, this specific combination of intimacy and disappointment represents a consistent source of neurological harm, the attachment system begins a quiet, irreversible process. It begins to detach, not loudly, not dramatically, not in a way that announces itself, but completely. Bowlby described attachment as a behavioral system, not just an emotion, but a set of biological impulses that activate toward specific figures who have been encoded as safe and available. When those figures are repeatedly experienced as unsafe, as sources of pain, dismissal, or chronic disappointment, the attachment system does not simply reduce its activation. It begins to reroute entirely. The brain starts quietly redirecting the emotional energy that was flowing toward this person back toward the self, back toward safety, back toward regulation, back toward the nervous system's own survival. And what this looks like from the outside is an empath who seems to have simply stopped caring. But what is actually happening, what is neurologically, biologically, irrevocably happening, is that the brain has completed a risk assessment that it has been running for months. And the assessment concluded, this relationship costs more than it returns. This person activates more threat than they resolve. This dynamic is not survivable on current terms. And so the detachment begins, quietly, without announcement, the way a body removes a splinter, not all at once, not painfully, just gradually, organically, until one day it is simply gone. Now let's talk about the moment that shocks everyone. The moment the other person notices, because there is always a moment when they notice. And the response to that moment reveals everything that was true about the relationship that both people somehow managed not to say out loud. When the empath was still reaching, still expressing, still trying, still asking for what they needed, they were easy to dismiss. Their presence was predictable. Their effort was available on demand. Their patience could be tested without consequence. The moment that ends is the moment everything shifts. B.F. Skinner's research on extinction, the process which a previously reinforced behavior disappears when reinforcement is removed, identified what he called an extinction burst. When a reward that the brain has come to expect disappears, the brain does not simply accept its absence. It escalates, it tries harder. It generates more of the behavior that previously produced the reward. More urgency, more emotion, more effort, in one last attempt to restore what has been lost. And so, the person who ignored 100 expressed feelings suddenly notices the absence of the 101st. The person who responded to emotional vulnerability with deflection and dismissal is suddenly desperate to create emotional vulnerability. The person who never asked how the empath was doing is now asking constantly, and the empath sits in the center of this sudden attention and feels nothing. Not the relief they would have felt 6 months ago. Not the warmth they used to feel when this person finally showed up. Nothing. And that nothing frightens them both. Because for the empath, the nothing is not cruelty. It is the felt experience of a nervous system that has completed its detachment process. The empath is not withholding. There is simply nothing left to give in this direction. The emotional capital that was available, so abundantly, so generously available for so long, has been redirected. Back to the self, back to survival, back to relationships that do not require the empath to explain why they deserve to be heard. And here is what most people never understand about this stage. The empath is not punishing anyone. They are not playing a game. They are not waiting to be convinced to come back. They are not testing anyone's commitment. They have simply, finally, stopped being available in the specific way that this dynamic required. And that stopping is not reversible through the tools that would have worked 6 months ago. Not an apology, not a grand gesture, not the sudden appearance of the effort that was absent for years, because the brain has already completed the pattern. It already knows how this story ends. It ran it to conclusion, not in a dramatic final scene, but in 1,000 small moments that accumulated into certainty. And certainty, once established in the nervous system, does not dissolve in the face of effort. It simply observes, calmly, without reaction, without the emotional charge that used to make this dynamic feel so alive and important and real. And the absence of that charge, the absence of the reactivity, the hurt, the hope, is the silence, not grief, not anger, not punishment, completion. Now here is the reframe that changes how you understand everything that came before. The empath's silence is not failure. It is intelligence. Evolved, biological, relentless intelligence. The intelligence of a nervous system that was built to feel deeply, finally learning to feel strategically. Neuroscience researcher Lisa Feldman Barrett, in her theory of constructed emotion, describes how the brain constantly builds predictions about what is coming next based on accumulated experience. When experience consistently shows that a specific emotional investment produces pain instead of connection, the brain stops constructing the prediction of connection. It does not decide to give up. It updates its model of reality based on the evidence it has actually been given. This is not bitterness. This is not trauma response. This is the human brain operating exactly as it was designed to operate, building more accurate predictions so that the body can make better decisions. And the better decision, the decision that the nervous system was slowly working toward through every dismissed feeling, every unanswered need, every moment of choosing generosity in the face of indifference, is the decision to redirect, not away from love, away from this specific dynamic that was never going to evolve into love. And what the empath finds on the other side of that redirection, in the quiet, in the space where the exhausting effort used to live, is something they had almost forgotten was possible. Peace. Not the peace of resolution, not the peace of things being fixed or understood or apologized for. The peace of a nervous system that is no longer in a constant state of reaching towards something that was never going to reach back. The physiological research is unambiguous here. Removing chronic relational stressors, even when the removal involves grief and loss and disruption, produces measurable biological recovery. Cortisol levels stabilize, sleep quality improves, immune function recovers, the HPA axis returns to baseline. The body begins to heal from damage it was sustaining so quietly that the empath often did not realize how much of their basic functioning had been compromised. Until it stops, until the silence arrives. And with the silence comes a strange, unexpected thing. Clarity. The empath, who has gone quiet, is not confused about what happened. They are not still hoping. They are not still analyzing. They are not still searching for the interpretation that makes the other person's behavior make sense. The brain has already done that work. It ran the analysis quietly, consistently, relentlessly, over every dismissed feeling, every ignored need, every small moment that accumulated into the pattern, and it delivered a verdict, not loudly, not in anger, not with the dramatic finality that other people might have chosen, just a quiet, settled, unshakable knowing, and from that knowing, the silence. You were not abandoned by the empath's silence. You were shown, finally, the actual cost of what you were asking them to sustain. And the empath is not cold. They are not cruel. They are not indifferent. They are simply, finally, choosing themselves with the same consistency and completeness that they offered to you for so long, and you never once chose to match. That is not a punishment. That is a person, remembering they are one. The silence is not the end of who they are. It is the beginning of who they were always supposed to be, before they spent so long being available to someone who never learned to value what that availability actually cost. You can reach for them now, but understand what you are reaching for. Not someone who is waiting for you to try harder. Someone who has finally stopped waiting. And that difference between a person who is waiting and a person who has stopped is the most important thing you will ever learn about what the silence actually means. It was never about you becoming enough. It was about them finally deciding that they already were.